Welcome to lesson 14 of our cultural diversity training. Today we're going to be talking about families or individuals and families of European descent. So to understand European Americans today, we have to start with Europe's own identity development. Europe didn't always exist as a unified concept. It emerged from centuries of nomadic tribes and warfare and trade, and the Roman Empire brought infrastructure, law, and stability, and that allowed diverse groups like the Celtics, the Saxons, and the Slavs to really start identifying as part of something larger. And so when the empire fell, these groups merged culturally and linguistically into early European societies. And Christianity became the single most powerful unifying force. So the concept of being European came to mean being Christian, and then later being civilized and powerful. And that worldview, rooted in Christian morality and the hierarchy, that traveled with the settlers to the Americas, and it heavily shaped the new colony's ideas about identity, race, and belonging. So when Europeans began settling in North America in the 15th and the 16th centuries, they did so under the belief that they were discovering a new world. And that really erases the reality that the native civilizations had existed there for centuries. But most of the settlers came from economic gain, and some of them were seeking religious freedom, but only for their own sects, not for all. And so the English settlers, they quickly became dominant. They shaped the colonial language, the law, the governance, and their notions of superiority and divine destiny justified their systems of oppression that is going to echo for generations. And so these colonies began to mirror European hierarchies of class and race and gender, and legacies that are still influencing the cultural values of European Americans today. So between 1820 and 1998, nearly 2/3 of all the legal immigrants to the United States came from Europe. And immigration happened in certain waves. So first, we have this wave from the northern and western sides of Europe. And then later, we have the southern and eastern sides of Europe. And these early arrivals were often considered old stock Americans, and they benefited from proximity to the English norms. The later arrivals, like the Italians, the Polish, the Irish, the Jews, they faced intense discrimination. So these intra-white hierarchies reminded us that even among the Europeans, ethnicity mattered. And over time, as these groups assimilated, they became, quote, white. It's kind of this constructed racial category that it's promising privilege in exchange for conformity to these Anglo-American cultural norms. So the United States was built on this idea of a melting pot. It's a metaphor that suggests that all cultures blend into one unified identity. But this concept is largely required the non-Anglo groups to really conform to the white Protestant values. So then later on, we have the salad bowl analogy that's emerging, which is implying that diverse groups could retain distinct flavors within a shared society, but still the dominant flavor remains white and Anglo. And so this American dream becomes a moral narrative that's rooted in self-reliance and upward mobility, but also in the erasure of ethnic and cultural diversity. And this is how the white American ethnic identity evolved, not as really a fixed heritage, but as a social position built on power and normalization. Ethnocentric monoculturalism is the belief that one's cultural worldview, like often Western, white, and Christian, is superior to all others. And this worldview informs laws and educations and mental health systems. White privilege is often invisible to those who hold it, and it manifests through unearned advantages in safety and employment, housing, and representation. And it's shaping how counselors are interpreting behavior and emotion and even pathology. So counselors must constantly reflect on how privilege is affecting both their clients and themselves, and recognizing that neutrality is impossible in a culture that's built on imbalance. So we have to understand whiteness. Whiteness is not a static identity. It's a process. Groups once excluded from whiteness, like Italians or Irish immigrants, eventually became part of it by distancing themselves from other marginalized groups. So this becoming white involved linguistic assimilation, intermarriage, and a rejection of ethnic traditions that were seen as foreign. So whiteness operates as both a shield and a gate. It grants access to power while reinforcing exclusion of others. And understanding this process helps counselors to unpack intergenerational privilege and internalized bias within these European American clients. So European Americans are not a monolith. So within this group exists some vast differences in ancestry, language, religion, socioeconomic class. We have Catholics, Protestants, Jews, and secular Europeans, and they're carrying distinct histories and values. So regional cultures like Italian American, Polish American, Irish American, they still influence traditions and identity formation. But in mainstream culture, these nuances are often flattened under the single label of white. And so counselors can help clients rediscover heritage and belonging beyond their racial identity, which can strengthen resilience and empathy towards diversity. Today's European immigrants, they're going to include professionals, refugees, students from Eastern Europe, the Balkans, and Russia. And a lot of these people are arriving because they're fleeing economic collapse or political instability, while others are seeking education or work opportunities. And although they may appear culturally similar to Americans, these clients are facing unique barriers like language adaptation and credential recognition and hidden discrimination based on accent or religion. So counselors should approach them with the same cultural sensitivity that's afforded to non-European immigrant groups. And for European immigrants, especially those who arrive as adults, immigration can trigger grief and loss. And they often experience separation from extended family and reduced professional status and anxiety about financial stability. And these stressors are going to compound with culture shock and a guilt towards the family that they left behind. And so counselors can provide a safe space to explore identity shifts and belonging and adaptation without judgment. And acculturation refers to the process of adapting to mainstream American norms, language, work ethics, gender roles, and even emotional expression. So for many European immigrants, this process involves letting go of those collectivistic values in favor of individualism. And children often assimilate faster than their parents, and that's going to create intergenerational conflict. So counselors can help families negotiate these tensions by affirming both adaptation and heritage. And though it's often associated with privilege today, European ethnic groups were not always viewed as fully American. So we have Irish, Italian, Polish, and Jewish immigrants that faced severe prejudice. So they were labeled as inferior or criminal or any other number of labels that were negative. And understanding this legacy of discrimination really helps contextualize European American ambivalence toward identity. Some have internalized shame or disconnection from their heritage. So counselors can explore how this cultural amnesia influences their values and their relationships and some of their biases towards other groups. And counseling European descent clients is going to require acknowledging both privilege and pain. Their stories are often going to include pride in their heritage, mixed with some discomfort about systemic inequalities. And the cultural humility means inviting clients to examine their assumptions about race and fairness and success. We want to encourage reflection on how their identity is intersecting with power without judgment or shame. The goal here is insight, not guilt. The respectful model offers a holistic framework for understanding clients beyond their surface identity. and it reminds counselors to explore the many different dimensions that shape a client's worldview. So religion, socioeconomic status, gender, trauma, family history. For European descent clients, this model helps balance recognition of privilege with genuine human struggle. So a white client may hold a systemic power, but they're still going to face poverty or loss or generational trauma. And the model encourages us to meet each person as a whole being, complex, contextual, and they are worthy of empathy. And when we work with European immigrants, it's going to be important to understand that mental health challenges are often rooted in acculturative stress. And the emotional toll of adapting to a new culture while preserving someone's heritage, that's extreme. A lot of these people experience a sense of loss of status. Professionals from like Eastern or Southern Europe may find that, their credentials are not recognized in the United States. And that's going to lead to feelings of failure and shame and frustration. There's also language barriers that intensify that isolation and prevent clients from fully expressing their emotions or understanding therapeutic language. And some of them somaticize distress. So they report symptoms like headaches or chest pain or fatigue rather than labeling these experiences as anxiety or depression. And then due to some cultural norms around emotional restraint, that's going to come up as physical. And then we have intergenerational conflict, and that's frequently going to come up as children are acculturating more quickly than their parents. They're adopting new values around independence and gender role and authority. And the parents might perceive this as disrespect or a loss of cultural identity. And the children might feel misunderstood or like their parents are trying to control them. And then, in a lot of European cultures, especially those with like collectivist or conservative traditions, there's remaining this significant stigma around mental health treatment. Clients might prefer to seek help from a priest or family or community members before they turn to counseling. And counselors can normalize this help seeking and frame therapy as a skill building or a problem solving and use culturally resonant metaphors to really encourage engagement. So we can use the narrative approach, and this is a really powerful method when we're working with European immigrant clients, especially those grappling with displacement or loss of cultural identity. So immigration is often going to disrupt a person's life story. It's kind of their sense of who I am and where I belong. And so narrative counseling is just going to allow the client to reauthor their own stories and reclaim agency over experiences that maybe they felt forced upon them by their circumstances or systemic barriers. So this approach is encouraging the client to externalize their problems rather than internalize the blame. So for example, instead of saying like, I am failing in America, the client might reframe it as the immigration system has made adaptation more difficult. And this subtle shift, it restores the power and the self-compassion. And so the counselors can also invite clients to honor the intergenerational narratives, and that connects them with ancestral resilience and the family migration story and maybe some like cultural strengths that can really provide grounding in the present. And for some of our clients, we might want to integrate some folk wisdom or religious values or maybe some family sayings that can kind of bridge the old and the new worlds together. And it's important in narrative therapy, it's decentering the counselor. We're only acting as facilitators of meaning, not experts defining pathology. The goal is not just symptom reduction, but it's more identity reconstruction. We're helping our clients build a coherent, strength-based life story that acknowledges both pain and persistence. And so we want to encourage reflective writing, photo journaling, or recorded oral histories. These can serve as like healing tools for clients who have experienced cultural disruption or loss of their homeland or maybe generational disconnection. Also, we can use creative arts. This kind of offers an expressive, nonverbal way for European immigrant clients to process their emotions and really reconnect with their heritage, especially when words can feel inadequate or maybe there's some language barriers that exist. So, through art, music, dance, writing, clients can really safely explore loss and their identities and even hope in ways that are transcending the spoken language. So some creative modalities are going to serve as like a cultural bridge. So for example, using folk songs or traditional embroidery or storytelling as like therapeutic entry points can validate a client's cultural pride and create continuity between past and present. So for clients from cultures that really value restraint or emotional control, creative expression provides this symbolic outlet for deep-seated grief or anxiety or even like nostalgia. And then we have drama therapy and psychodrama, which kind of allows the client to act out family dynamics. Maybe they can act out their migration experience or intergenerational struggles. And that really turns abstract pain into visible, transformable narratives. Visual arts like collages or paintings, they might help them externalize emotions. And writing or maybe poetry allows for like a cognitive organization of their experience. So the key is to invite creativity, not performance. We want to emphasize that art making is not about skill, but it's about meaning and connection. The process itself, the colors, the rhythm, the movement, it restores a sense of balance and harmony that words can't alone. And collaborative art making between the counselor and the client is really going to enhance the therapeutic alliance. It's going to signal respect and mutual exploration. And we know that creativity becomes both an intervention and a relationship. It's kind of like a living metaphor for adaptation and resilience and transformation. Jumping into social justice counseling really quick, this calls for the counselor to move beyond the therapy room and address the social systems that are impacting the mental health of our clients. So it integrates advocacy with empathy. It empowers our clients to navigate injustices while striving to dismantle it. So for European descent clients, this might mean recognizing how systemic privileges shape their worldview while also learning to use that privilege to support equity for others. And equity means fairness. Access means opportunity. Participation means inclusion. Harmony is going to mean the shared well-being of all communities. And this is really the true spirit of multicultural counseling. So the European American culture continues to shape the norms of US society, but it's rarely examined as a cultural identity in and of itself. So by understanding its history, how the power and religion and migration shaped what we call whiteness, counselors really can foster greater empathy and cultural competence. The goal is not to assign blame, but to bring awareness and to understand how every culture, including dominant ones, is going to shape mental health and family and meaning.